Well, world leaders have gathered in the German capital of Berlin today to push for an end to fighting in Libya. The United Nations wants to halt the flow of foreign weapons and troops into the country, where the internationally recognized government is being challenged by the warlord Khalifa Haftar. Let's cross now to our correspondent, that's Ira Spitzer, for more. Ira, are these talks underway? And tell us why this is such a high-stakes summit.
Well, talks are now underway. We've just had the arrivals of various delegations from all over the world. And as you mentioned there, these talks are extremely important, and there is a tremendous amount of interest and pressure from outside of the country of Libya, which really speaks to how internationalized this conflict has now become. Some of the chief protagonists here are Turkey and Russia. Both of those countries are backing opposite factions in Libya. Russia lending support to General Khalifa Haftar and the rebels who now control about 90% of the country. While Turkey has provided now military support to the United Nations-backed government in Tripoli. So talks earlier in the week in Moscow, which also included the leaders of the factions, and Russia and Turkey proved unsuccessful in establishing a long-term ceasefire. So these sides will now try again here in Berlin, and there's a tremendous amount at stake. The conflict in Libya has destabilized the region. Libya is now the main point of people smuggling for transporting migrants from Africa to Europe. And with this sort of proxy war which has developed, there are concerns, in the words of German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas earlier in the week, of Libya becoming another Syrian-type conflict. So there's a lot at stake here with this one-day summit in Berlin.
Ira, a permanent ceasefire, of course, like you're saying, will be first prize. But how difficult is it going to be for Berlin now to convince all the parties involved, and you've mentioned some of them, to stop providing weaponry and weapons to warring factions in Libya? Because they all clearly have very different agendas.
Right, that's going to be extremely difficult, of course. Germany and ahead of the conference saying that one of their goals is to reinstate or to have the UN arms embargo respected again in Libya. But the reality is we've seen support from countries like the United Arab Emirates offering support to Khalifa Haftar's rebels, and now, as I mentioned earlier, Turkey offering the support to the UN-backed government in Tripoli. So there's not necessarily an incentive, a clear incentive right now to reduce the flow of arms besides the desire to end the conflict. But when you look at the perspective of Khalifa Haftar, he's had a fairly successful military campaign so far. So the big challenge, I think, will be to try and convince him to pull back his forces and then talk about a peacekeeping type situation. But we're a long way from that right now.
We've got reports in of key oil ports that were blockaded by supporters of General Haftar. Can we interpret this, Ira, as a show of strength as these talks commence, and how will they impact on this discussion going forward?
Okay, I didn't fully hear the question there, but let me just address a couple other important points in this situation. One is that Turkey in December signed a gas exploration contract with the Libyan government, where they would like to explore for gas in the Mediterranean off the coast of Libya. So Turkey now has this tremendous economic interest in Libya, and that gas exploration deal would likely be null and void if the government in Tripoli were to fall. So when we talk about the proxy type situation that we're seeing on the ground in Libya, now there are economic interests on top of political interests. So it really has become a conflict which has extended far beyond Libya, and that is causing problems. Now, the hope here, of course, in Berlin is that by getting all of these people in the same room to discuss these issues, to perhaps cut this situation off before it really spirals out of control, if it indeed already hasn't. However, again, easier said than done.
Iris Batzau, correspondent coming to us from Berlin in Germany. Thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.